view of it. So Portugal had come down about 100 years earlier, and they had conquered the Canary Islands and took over their people and brought their Longhorn cattle with them. And so if you're ever going to conquer an area, or you're going to take it over, you're going to create a civilization, you need a power source. So these Longhorn cattle were oxen. They provided meat, they provided leather, because they didn't have cotton shirts back then. And so they had boots, and the horns made buttons, you milked them. They were very important to colonize any type of area. So they were established about 100 years before 1492 or 1495. So Columbus knew he had to bring them with him. So he went to the Canary Islands just like he had left before. And what that does, it cuts off about 3 weeks of travel if you leave from the Canary Islands. And so he was very successful by doing this. And so every ship that came over from then was bringing Longhorn cattle. And this is a tropical area. They don't have a winter, so grass grows year-round, so cattle become fat, and they're just great. You know, they did so well. And pretty soon, you know, they're all explorers. They're moving on around. They named this Espanola. It's now called Haiti. And so they moved on around Cuba and went up to Mexico and Texas and all in here. Took their cattle with them because it was a means of support. And so pretty soon, cattle are well established. They, you know, they didn't have barbed wire, so they got to where they'd escape. They would run wild. And so they just started breeding. And Longhorn cattle breed early. Most of them can breed about a year old. And they don't have problems birthing their calves. We have never had to assist or pull a calf with Longhorn cattle. And back when I was growing up, we had to do that every time somebody had a calf. So that's a big advantage for them. Now, as the cattle started dividing and multiplying, propagating, the herds got so large and everything that after a while these Spanish people are shipping back shiploads of hides. It's about the only thing you can send back, but they were sending it back to Europe. So it created an industry there. And so I want to go back and see if these are some of the people that what I was just talking about. I won't name them all, but you can see how they brought cattle over here every time because they were so valuable to our nation. Not our nation, but the new area. And in 1690, the first cattle were brought into East Texas. They were brought to Nacogdoches area. But the Indians were so tough there that the Catholic priests, they just abandoned everything, but they left their cattle. So the cattle started running wild here. And so you can see how, you know, like in 1600, Ranger and Province Jalisco was bringing 3,000 calves per year. And ships were headed back to Europe with their hides and everything. So, okay, I want to talk a little bit about the cow. This is what we picture as a fighting bull, you know, when we see them in the bull rings in Spain or Mexico. It's a Delidia bull or Andalusian bull, and that's the cow. Here's some more breeds of them. These are a little bit different. This is called a lineback, a cow that's got white down their back, and that's very common. This is a picture of a, doesn't that look terrible? That's what a lot of people picture the Longhorns as looking like. I had a lady not too long ago ask me, she said, "Can you eat those things?" So, yeah, they're pretty good to eat. But that's probably an old sick cow. There's some West Texas herds out around Kerrville, back around early 20s or something like that. There's some more pictures of them. This is a corkscrew horn. They're really highly desirable, and they're worth more than just a regular longhorn. And this is a bull, so they do get big. Bulls, they grow horns and body till they get at least 7 years old. Now they never stop, but they grow more at that time. And they're a little slower growth, I think, than some others, but they get tall. Like a black Angus never gets over that tall. My bull is about this tall, to me. And weighs about 2,000 pounds, so they're not a smaller animal at all. This was a famous steer that they put on train, and he went to the Chicago Fair. He went all over everywhere, and they're just fascinated because he had big horns. Well, all the steers have bigger horns than that now, so that just shows how they've progressed. And the breeders now are trying to get tip-to-tip measurements. Who's got the longest tip-to-tip measurements? There's two ways to measure them. You have total horn, which you start at the tip, and it's harder to do because you follow the horn down and across the head and back up to the tip. And then there's total, it's just straight across. And the largest bull, I have some pictures of him in here, the largest bull is about 103 inches from tip to tip. Steer's horns grow larger than bull's horns. And the steer's horn, world record in that, his name's Bucklehead. He's out south of San Antonio there. I've got my picture with him in here. But his measurements, it grows daily, but a few months ago it was 130 inches or something. And so he's an ugly animal too, but he's got some of the he has the biggest horns in the history of longhorns. So we have all these cattle here, and so okay, I'll go back to that. I'm condensing a lot of this because I've only got 15 minutes left, but here's why they're important. After the Civil War, there was just a shortage of food. The northern armies had eaten every chicken and pig and milk cow and everything to feed their armies. And food was pretty scarce in the South because they didn't have the men to farm or raise animals. So the northern industry, textile mills and steel mills and things, they needed laborers, and the black people did not fill that labor force, so they went to Europe, to Ireland, and they cleaned out their jails. They were having a potato famine over there, a blight, and so they were starving, and they didn't want to feed them in jail, so they put them on ships and sent them to the United States for labor. Okay, but they still got to eat. Now some Texans were sitting around thinking about, man, we got millions, I'm talking about millions of longhorns running around here. But we don't have a market. So let's create a market. Let's round them up, drive them up to Kansas. That was the nearest railroad. That's where it ended. So if we can get them up to there, we can ship them directly nonstop up to Chicago. They can slaughter them. They didn't have refrigeration, so they had to run everything quick. And so we take them over to the East Coast and sell them. Those people, they're hungry. So that's what created the market. Now, can you imagine a cowboy? He's got a good idea, but he's got to get that animal to Kansas. Boy, that just sounds so simple, doesn't it? Well, I don't want to be on a horse trying to get that animal, especially if she's got a calf or something, to round her up and get her into a herd where I can drive her. That is a big, big job. So I want you to understand it's a tough job, and that created a lot of this stuff, clothing and stuff that I wanted to tell you about.
Larry,
Yes, ma'am.
you have 45 minutes.
I have 45 minutes from now? Oh, thank you. Anybody want a drink? Okay, so this industry it's kind of picked up from the vaqueros, the Hispanics that live down there. They started out ranching because that's all they could do, you know, and then they would sell the hides. A lot of times they would just round them up and drive them down to the Galveston Bay, and they would slaughter them at the Galveston Bay. And they had, you know, Longhorns are not extremely fat animals. So, but there was a market for tallow, which is beef fat, because that's all they had to make candles out of. Okay, and then the hides. Leather was very, very important. So they would just round them up, drive them to the Bay Area, and slaughter them, scrape off all the fat they could, they had salt from the seawater they evaporated, cover them with salt, stack them up, and they would ship the hides back to Europe. So it had some value for the Longhorns. But you got to think, it's hard for me to imagine, but those Longhorns roamed here in Texas for over 350 years. Think about that. So they become well adapted. All the slow ones got eaten by the predators. The sick ones died. Their horns got longer to protect their young. And they bred early with no calving problems, and they multiplied. I'm talking about millions and millions of Longhorns. And they were in this East Texas area right here also. They called them the Piney Rooters or something like that. No, Piney Runts. Their horns were not as big as the ones from Southwest Texas. It was the minerals in the soil that affected them. So, they adopted clothes and things like, you know, they had hats, and except the Civil War had just ended. This period started off at about 1867 and went for about 20 years. So they had leftover war materials, hats and things. This is a hat that my wife bought me from Johnny's down here on Cotton back in 83 or something like 82, some year like that. I remember I was coaching at Spring Hill and she bought it for me. It looked nice back then. I have worn this thing. It's so thin. I'm telling you, it's my favorite hat, but she won't let me wear it. She said she calls it the Jed Clampett hat, you know, and I call it a cowboy hat. So anyway, their dress was designed to protect them, and a hat was very important. I mean, they dip water out of the stream and water their horse before or after they drank out of it, you know. And this one's got a few bullet holes in it, you know, that she shoots at me every once in a while. So, but they normally had a felt hat. Some had some form of a straw hat. Sombreros were not accepted. That's why they made them smaller. Chasing that cow through the brush in a sombrero, it's not going to stay on your head very long. You know, something's going to knock it off. It's just too big. And so they usually wore a vest of some type. It was usually made out of wool, and it was warm. I love a vest. It just keeps your body temperature really nice. And chaps. These are chaps that I bought from a bull rider at his funeral. Oh, but really good thick leather and everything, and if you're riding through the bushes with all those thorns on them, I mean, they'll eat you up. You know, around San Angelo, all those mesquite bushes, They got thorns that long. And so, and I wear these when we're branding cattle. Melanie brands all the cattle. I castrate the cattle. We don't hire anybody. Cynthia helps every once in a while when she's in. And so these chaps, I wear them. They got pockets in the front. And stick the knife in there just real quick and get it out. And so they're valuable. These, you could not round up longhorns or drive them anywhere. If you see any pictures in here, everybody's got on chaps. It's mandatory. And nobody has to tell you to wear them. You'll wear them the second time. So here we have, you can see the horns on these animals. This is a real picture. They're driving them across some creek out in West Texas somewhere, driving them up to Kansas. This is a picture that I found of a real cowboy back then, but it was staged. You know, he's got a 6-gun over here, where they have a 6-gun there where they'd put it on all the cowboys to take their picture. But most of the cowboys carried a 6-gun, a 6-shooter. It was usually a 45 Colt. It was a long Colt. I have one, and I carry it on the ranch quite a bit. It's got a shell about that long and about that big around, and it's guaranteed to never wound anything. If you hit it, it's not wounded. It's hit. So, but you can see his hat there. That's kind of one they just had for him. It's too nice for him to have come off of a cattle drive and get his picture taken. And his chaps are big and heavy, and the bandana around his neck, I was going to bring one of those, and I ran out of time. But the bandana was, oh man, you just got to have one. One thing, those cows just kick up all this dust and everything, and you'd be dead before the cows were. So you had to pull it up over your nose, keep the Doc, you look